I've asked Andrew to pull up a stool and join me for a few interview questions, much like we did when his friend Cindy Morgan was here with us a few weeks ago. So Andrew, once again, welcome for those who've come in late. We're honored that Andrew Greer, our friend from Nashville, singer, songwriter, producer, author, is here with us to lead us in worship today and next Sunday. First of all, this is one of your favorite songs, I think. You've put a lot of passion to it. I have heard it before, but tell us the meaning of it, why it's special to you.
Yeah, I think, well, you know, regardless of where we are in life, regardless of what our family structure looks like, what we may have in abundance in our family and what we may have in absence, I think we're all on the same journey of discovering our Creator, God, as the fulfillment of all things that we need. I grew up in a Baptist tradition in Texas, and so it kind of hurt me at first to sing to God, be my mother, be my father, be my sister, be my brother, because just the thought that God as our Father is kind of the first thought and teaching we have. But when I began to think about it, whether I'm missing some nurturing care, or whether I'm missing some guidance, or whether I'm missing some brotherly or sisterly love, or the love of a romantic companion, whatever it is, what I love in that last chorus is it speaking directly to God will fulfill and is the fulfillment of all these needs in my life.
Well, it's a song with a powerful message for sure. I want to get to talking about Plains, Georgia, because that's a lot of where your focus is. And we're very fortunate. First of all, everybody here has a connection to Georgia, where President Carter was not only governor, but then president, and even those who would have not voted for him for president, all of us together admired he and Mrs. Carter in their life of service and Habitat for Humanity. But
so you're not all Democrats.
We have we have close ties with close ties with the church at Maranatha. Bill Givens, one of our own members, was pastor at Fellowship, was Miss Lillian Carter's pastor, and then later a member at Maranatha. And then I think I understand that you were present when Ashley preached at Maranatha a couple of weeks ago. How did she do?
She did awesome. They loved it. They even said we couldn't even tell you were reading. That's what they said. No. They're not used to that, you know.
Yeah. Well, Ashley is sort of a gift, and everywhere she goes, people want to keep her, and we certainly want to keep her here.
They are in love with her. Yep.
Hey, before we get to Plains, though, there are a lot of projects. You've dabbled in a lot of different things, a lot of things going on now. I watched the interviews on TV and on YouTube and et cetera. What are things you're working on right now?
Well, a few things. One of the things that's most important to me is the work that I'm doing in Plains, which we'll talk about. I just kind of have a split personality. I could never fully commit to one thing. I guess that's why I'm not married. And so I grew up loving music and loved writing songs, and that's what really kept me in Nashville. You met my very dear friend Cindy Morgan if you were here a few weeks ago. One of the finest and greatest songwriters. She's a legend in Nashville as a songwriter. But came up through the school of songwriting and writing songs and telling stories for other people. I think when I'm in love with the story. And so then I've had the opportunity to do that through the written word. But yeah, right now it's back to music a little bit. I haven't done a record that just reflected my journey in life with others, with myself, and with God. And so next year, beginning of next year, releasing a record called Songs from the Dark, which were largely songs written at the height of the pandemic. The church that I went to at the time, which I'd gone to for a long time, had asked me if I would just write a song a week while we weren't gathering about maybe what we were feeling corporately. And so some sadness in those songs, but I feel like when we are willing to probe elements of sadness in our lives, that's where we find a great well of hope. Yeah. And so, so that's one important thing, the Plains thing. I don't really want to talk about work.
Well, speaking of which, so the Plains Project, which we'll explain more about in just a moment, you got so involved in it, you've actually bought a house and you've moved there. What is it that attracted you to Plains? It's a city with a population of 500, a very small but loving congregation. Why are you there?
Yes, a lot of my friends asked me that. I live in Nashville, just south of Nashville, but when I got to working in the town, I crave community. I'm an introvert who craves community, so that can get real confusing. And and you know this living in this area or around this area, Atlanta, of course, is a huge metropolitan area. It's easy to get disconnected in the middle of so many things going on, which is kind of ironic. And so when I went to the town, which is, again, like you said, it's a whistle-stop town, you know, there's only so many people there. I just had forgotten what it was like to know your neighbor. And I'd forgotten what it was like for someone to mow your lawn and not ask anything in return, you know. And I crave to be in community, not just receive the community of places like that, but to be in community. The older I get, the more I crave that close-knit thing. There is a thing in Plains. There's something that's you can't quite put your finger on. It's a little mysterious. It's really compelling and attractive. But I think, you know, we were created to care for one another. And so when you see that in such palpable ways, it's hard to not make a beeline for it. You know what I mean?
Well, and when you first went to Plains to visit, I was talking to our mutual friend, Jan Williams, and I said, by the way, Andrew's a singer. And next thing I knew, I think your very first Sunday, they were asking you to come play and sing there. And then President Miss Carter fell in love with you. And then from there, you and Cindy were asked to write a song for Mrs. Carter's 95th birthday last year. And I saw a clip of that on TV here in Atlanta. And so how did that come about? And tell us about the song.
Well, I should say first, Barry and Amanda were my connection to Plains. I was escaping Hurricane something when I was working in, I can't remember, somewhere in Florida where there was a hurricane coming. And I had my own car, and I was heading back to Nashville to home, but had a few more days to spend, and saw Plains on the map. And the Carters have long been heroes of mine. I've read so much of their work and followed their work in the world. And so I visited Plains, and Barry and Amanda somehow saw I was there, maybe on Facebook or something, and said, you've got to meet my friends George and Jan. So you really are the reason, you guys are the first direct connection to me finding a new place to call home. And yes, met George and Jan, and then met the Carters, and on a non-teaching Sunday. So President Carter was not teaching Sunday school that Sunday, so it was just the 30 or 40 of them there that are there normally. Last year, Mrs. Carter, Rosalind, turned 95, which of course both President and Mrs. Carter are in the last days of their lives here on earth. And so we knew how all the moments in their last few years of life have been special because of their advanced ages. And so their niece asked if Cindy and I would just kind of commemorate her life. You know, sometimes Rosalind gets lost in the mix a little bit. President Carter is a very strong individual, but is the first one to express how Rosalind has been his 50-50, full equal partner in his ideas, in his work, and in their discipleship of Jesus, which is that is what compels me about the Carters, or anyone who makes their living, many of you, I'm sure, in just the public sphere, and yet find the path to continue to follow Jesus, you know, regardless of what is happening, and not even regardless, but with all the world around us, to be fully present here and yet be fully present in following the footsteps of Jesus. So we wrote a song that we kind of liked. And we sang it for her 95th birthday. It was a very, very special moment. I mean, definitely a moment, them being my heroes, that I will remember the rest of my life.
Well, and speaking of the Carters, we mentioned our admiration for their service, their work. Everyone's been reading the paper. We know that President Carter's been in hospice care. We know that Mrs. Carter has some health issues. But they're not like on the brink of this is necessarily their last day. So what is the latest you've heard about their health so we get a firsthand report?
Sure. Well, I was talking to their son, Chip, a couple weeks ago, and so it's all upbeat. I mean, I guess I don't know yet. If I live long enough, if I get the chance to live to 99 or, you know, in 96, then maybe I can speak more first person about this. But I would guess that's a good life, to have lived most of that in health and in present-mindedness. So I think in general it's a welcome thing. You know what I mean? It's time. And I think they're ready, but in the meantime, they're getting out there's a road that goes by their house that's kind of off the main road, and the nurses and Chip and some of the kids, as they visit, are getting them out for some fresh air. And so I guess he's just got a will. They were last night for the fireworks. I was in Plains last night for fireworks, and they're gazing up at the sky. So
That's good. Yeah,
so we'll
great.
see.
Yeah, good. Well, you've started a big media project. We're very excited about it. Tell us about the project and what your goal and aim is.
Yeah, that's what got me to, well, once I visited Plains and then got attached through the Howards and George and Jan Williams and some people there, I have long wanted to tell story through long-form film, documentaries. And I think that's just another iteration of my love of story. And we were looking for what story would that be. And after visiting Plains, which is very much a traditional town in the Deep South, there's a train track that runs right through the middle of Plains. And the majority of the black citizens live on one side, and the majority of the white citizens live on the other side. That's a fairly common thing in deep southern towns, largely because of the history of those towns and how they were segregated for years. But then as I began to build relationships in town, though, I realized they do live together. I began to question, Nashville has become a very metropolitan place, and so there's a lot of political correctness. There's a lot of, we've all been educated about how to say things better and how to treat people better, good things, but sometimes it doesn't always account for the nuances of human beings living together, which is not always black and white. And so what we're in the post-production process of is a documentary about race relations in the Deep South, specifically set in Plains, and then under the positive influence of the Carters. And so it's bringing in a lot of current angles in a very folksy way. My idea with film, the beautiful part of film is you can watch it in the comfort of your own home or in a quiet theater, and if you get pinged by something or a question is raised that has never been raised in your mind before, it's not a confrontational thing. You know, you're not going back and forth on Facebook, or you're not arguing with someone over coffee. You're able to sit with that question for a minute. And the more I understand what we know of Jesus' life throughout the Gospels, there's a lot of unanswered questions. But through the process of asking questions we don't always have the answers to, I do think we find a more pure way to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hinge on these two things. And so that's my life's goal, because that's Jesus' words, and that's just one of the overarching goals of this film through talking about race in the Deep South.
So you may not want to go there, but do I recall, so if you want to skip the question, it's fine, because I didn't give you any warning, but do I recall Cindy mentioning to me that you and her are working on a song that might be used in the documentary, maybe a song about President Carter?
Oh, yes, we will do a soundtrack. That's what we know to do, is music. So if the film is terrible, at least we had good music, But yes, when we had the honor of writing the song for Mrs. Carter, and then I was in town when hospice care came to the Carter's house to spend the rest of his days there with him and Mrs. Carter. And so I called up Cindy and I said, well, I think we better get on the ball, and write a song for Jimmy and about his life. And so we got another guy in town, Wayne Kirkpatrick, who's an incredible songwriter in Nashville and country music and all kinds of stuff. And together, it's called A Starry Crown, Jimmy's song. But the chorus is just, son, you've done good, you've done well, so lay it on down and go on home. And I think for any of us that are ambitious in our lives and that have ambition and have goals and desires, it's a whole nother spiritual thing to actually lay down the work that we've been doing our whole lives and surrender into eternal communion with God. That can be a process in and of itself. And so that's what we tried to capture.
Yeah. Well, let's mark this down. Later on when the song is finished, we want you and Cindy both to come back and do that song.
Cindy's better than me, so you want Cindy to come along.
No. Well, in just a moment, I'm going to share the briefest sermon that they've had since I've been
Yay,
at
that was my
Wieuca.
goal.
Yeah,
Someone told me if I went long enough in the interview, the sermon would be short.
Yeah,
Happy holidays.
So, well, moving right along. So the text is about the things that make a nation great. And it talks about righteousness, but in the Hebrew language, that's about things like service and integrity and character. What are the things that you've seen in the Carters, not as politicians, but as servants, that help make a great community and a great nation?
Well, I think in anybody that I've seen who I admire the way they interact with others around them, first is just an element of seeing. And so it takes time to see people. You know, it takes space within my mind, and my heart to actually see someone. And so I've been amazed by it's a certain discipline to undistract myself, or to put my phone down, or to turn the TV off, whatever it is, to actually engage with people in a way of seeing them. And I've seen that discipline, which I think is in the Carters, and I think that's motivated by love. Love will hunker us down to do hard things, And so I've seen them approach hard things with no fear of failure. And maybe that comes back to, love in Scripture. Love covers a multitude of sins. So maybe when we're trying hard and it's motivated by love, maybe the rest is covered. We don't have to worry if we messed up. In the motivation of love, I think there's God. And so that's what I've seen in them, a motivation of love that has actually played out in their efforts and their willingness to submit their life to those efforts. I can only hope to model after that just a little bit.
Well, it's so well captured in your music. And Andrew, thank you for being here, for leading us, and for sharing these moments in the interview. Hang around. I'm gonna call on you again in just a few moments.
Did I go long enough?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Andrew, thank you. In Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 34, there's an unusual proverb, and in the Psalms and Proverbs and all the wisdom literature, there are prayers for the coronation of the king or the queen. There are words that extol our praying for politicians, but this emphatic word says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin condemns any people. What are the things that make a nation great? According to Proverbs, greatness in a nation is achieved through rightness, or in Hebrews, the word is right wiseness. In other words, the greatness of a nation is measured by the character and conduct of its citizens, not the popularity or the rhetoric of its leaders. Psalm 33:12 says, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he chose for his inheritance." If there was a singular driving force in the writings of Solomon and King David behind the establishment of the Old Testament kingdom, if there was one singular driving force from the founding fathers about the establishment of these United States, it was to establish a land that thrives on liberty, respect, service, and citizenship. Here are 4 quick things that I think help make a nation great that are reflected throughout not only the Proverbs, but throughout all the New Testament. First, it's important that we as believers pray for our country and our leaders. In 1 Timothy 2:1-4, it says, "First of all, I urge that supplications and prayers and intercessions and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a good and peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way." It's part of our spiritual and our civic responsibility to pray for our leaders, whether we agree with them or not, and whether we voted for them or not, because they are currently the leaders of our community, of our city, our state, and our nation. Second, to respect those who think and vote differently. Taylor Swift, that great musical theologian, was a big hit when she came through Atlanta. And she said, we don't need to share the same opinions as others, but we always need to be respectful. No two people think exactly alike, and therefore it stands to reason that no two Christians think exactly alike. Yet we need each other to inform and expand our perspective. Third, use your gifts and talents to make a difference. Jimmy Carter, in his biography, said, "I have one life and one chance to make it count for something. My faith demands that I do whatever I can, wherever I am, whenever I can, for as long as I can, with whatever I have to try to make a difference." And the daily efforts of living with character, faith, and integrity make a difference, even if you don't see the results immediately. And finally, exercise the privileges of citizenship. Participate in civil political discourse. Vote your conscience and respect and protect the rights of others to do the same. God and country are not synonyms. Both stir our passion and they invite our allegiance, but only one is worthy of our worship, and that is God. You, and you can make our country and our world a better place simply by following Jesus. Andrew mentioned earlier our connection to Plains. We sort of came in through the back door. I had met Governor Jimmy Carter when I was a 10th grader, and he spoke at the state FFA convention when I was a delegate from Alexandria High School. Little did we know that a couple of years later he would become President of the United States. I'd attended his Sunday school class, but one of our Jacksonville State students happened to marry one of our youth, and he became the Carter's longtime director of security. He was Secret Service. And I said to Keith one day, Keith had left the Carter administration to go down to take a job in Fort Lauderdale, and within just a few months, President Carter called and begged him to come back. Keith is one of the most avid Republicans that I know. And I said, Keith, how do you, as a devout Republican, get along with President Carter, a devout Democrat? He said, if anyone could have persuaded me to become a Democrat, he would have. I can't vote like him, but his integrity is unshakable. And I admire his life of service. Abraham Lincoln is attributed with saying, "Sir, my concern is not whether God is on our side. My great concern is to be on God's side." Let our life commitment, our faith, our daily walk reflect to others that we're on God's side. It's no wonder the Old Testament historian in 2 Chronicles said, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, I will forgive their sin and heal their land." Serve with your best gifts. Aim to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. And if you're at the beginning of that walk, that journey, that faith adventure, we'd love to encourage you as you embark from the starting line. If you'd like to know more about what it means to be a Christian, if you're ready to be baptized to declare your faith before others, or if you're looking for a church home, you'll not find a friendlier, more welcoming church ready to use your gifts to serve than right here at Wieuca. Our ministers are available following the service, or we can set up a time to meet with you for coffee later this week. Andrew and Cindy wrote the song for Rosalind Carter's birthday. I've known it as Rosalind's song, but it's a powerful testimony of her life of service, a testimony of the things that make a nation great. Andrew, I see you picked up the guitar. Would you share a rendition of that song for us in closing?
Deep down in Georgia, high up in those pines. Mom and Dad and all the angels sang when she arrived. It was the roaring 20s in that quiet, dusty town. A bus driver, seamstress, a baby in a little white house. Strong as steel, sweet as a magnolia. Morning prayers and evening meals, that's how the Lord grows you. Fly, 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 butterfly. Oh, ooh, oh. Well, she grew up strong and gentle, apple of her daddy's eye. 13's too young to have to tell him goodbye. And now she's 18 in college, with wings to fly away, with a Navy man in a rumble seat, in love on a first date. Well, she's strong as steel, sweet as a magnolia. Love and loss that hurts and heals, that's how the Lord grows you. Fly, 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 butterfly. Fly, fly, Rosalind, fly. From a little white house to a white house, 800 miles away. Well, God knows, only God knows how to make the world a better place. She walked into the shadows in the darkness of their minds, gave them all the love her heart had to help them see the light. Now deep down in Georgia, in those high and lofty pines, her mom and dad and all the angels, they're singing. Yeah, mom and dad and all the angels, they're singing. Fly, fly, butterfly, fly, Rosalind, fly. Fly,